You're in the hands of an adolescent.
It's mystery. I don't like mysteries. Your belly ache. I got a duty right now.
Aye, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Warp Core podcast. I am Urza Master. Joining me as always, Lord Uther and Fert Derby. Welcome, gentlemen, back to the Starfleet Academy chambers. We are jumping back in. Season 2, Star Trek, the original series today. Starting off with Obsession from Season 2. This is a unique episode. Definitely hails to some literary references and gives us some very interesting tropes that I'm sure we're going to love discussing in detail. But, gentlemen, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that we are cruising along towards 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. Big thank you to all of our fans, all of our followers out there. Continue to like, subscribe, share us out. Any of your Trekkie friends or any of the other content we deliver here on Penny Rebrand, if you've got people in your life who might enjoy it, pass it along. We would love to entertain them. And, well, I won't take up any more of our time because I believe Fert Derby has a lot to say about Obsession. Fert, take us away.
Thank you, Urza Master. Thank you, Lord Uther. And thanks to you, Trekkies all at home. We are indeed jamming through the holiday aired episodes of 1967. We are deep in December here. There's still 10 days left on the shopping calendar. This was December 15th, 1967, in which Star Trek Obsession first rolled onto television sets around the country. We have some new faces behind the camera this week, or at least one new face. Ralph Senesky returns as a director. You might remember him for the episode where all the flowers convinced the Enterprise crew to give up their day jobs and just hang out and farm and love. That was This Side of Paradise. We talked about that right here on the Warp Core in Warp Core episode 40. And you can click on subscribe and check out our website and our YouTube channel, and you can find Warp Core 40 and see what we thought of that hippy-dippy episode of Star Trek, and that was definitely one for the ages. Ralph also directed Metamorphosis, which we talked about in Warp Core 48, and that one had the Jello mold and Zephram Cochrane, and the references spiritually and literally to Ilea from Star Trek the Motion Picture, when an alien consciousness takes over an existing human body. And it had a really annoying diplomat that ended up coming out okay in the end, even though there was a galactic conflict that still needed smoothing out. So Ralph's been around, and he's actually helmed two of the more interesting, dare I say it, slightly offbeat episodes prior. The writer was Art Wallace, and Art is new to the show, and we'll see him once or twice more before our 5-year mission ends. Primarily, he worked in soap operas. He worked for Dark Shadows, which was an unusual ABC soap opera in the late 60s, early 70s. You've seen General Hospital and Days of Our Lives. Well, this one involved vampires, Barnabas Collins, and it was a horror soap opera, if you will. Tim Burton reimagined it a few years ago for the big screen, I believe, with Chloe Grace Moritz and Johnny Depp as part of the cast. But this was Art Wallace's bread and butter for a few years as showrunner and writer and producer. He was also a story consultant for All My Children. So like I say, his background was in twisting, turning narratives that had to be constantly refreshed 5 days a week for stay-at-home moms and people out of work. So that's where he comes to this one here. And we have an episode that, in theory, gives us the flip side of the Doomsday Machine. In that one, you'll remember, an obsessed Commodore is determined to take out a potentially lethal galaxy-swallowing machine / entity. And it is Kirk and the Enterprise who have to talk him down out of his madness, using sort of the classic Moby Dick, Captain Ahab metaphors that have worked so well in Trek throughout the years, including Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, and Star Trek First Contact. So this is a familiar idea of someone who is myopic and laser focused on extracting vengeance or justice or so forth. Only this time we flip it. Kirk and the crew were the voice of reason in the Doomsday Machine, but here it might be James Tiberius Kirk who is on the wrong side of the obsession game. He might be the one blinding all other responsibilities and accountabilities because of his need for vengeance. And gentlemen, that's kind of where I'm going to start briefly our discussion here, because if you consider this episode, and then you consider the Deadly Years, which we just talked about not too long ago on the Warp Core, you're definitely going to want to check that one out. When Kirk and the crew were stricken with an age-defying madness that physically altered them and made it almost impossible to control a starship because they had the arthritis and they couldn't remember things. In here, we have Kirk chasing after some ominous smoke, and darned if, much like John Carpenter's The Fog, darned if even just the simple special effect of shooting up some fog machine vapor that appears, behind a character or in the distance, it actually really, really works. It actually, for a $1.95 special effect, it actually produces the desired result. It doesn't come across in any way as cheesy or ill-applied. And that is what Kirk is after, this being that cloaks itself in a veil of mist, but can take out 3 red shirts just like that. And in fact, we do lose several red shirts in this episode, cannon fodder, if you will, to this creature. This creature and Kirk tangoed once before when he was serving on the Farragut. So it's always nice to hear the Farragut come up, and he is determined not to make that same mistake again, even if it means that life-saving medical supplies are not delivered in time to a colony that badly needs them. And so, like I say, gentlemen, let's look at this from our veneration and adoration of James Kirk. Both the Deadly Years and Obsession, he's still a heroic man. He still deserves that Starfleet statue. He's still the best, brightest, smartest guy in the room. I think we can all testify and agree to that. We'll stipulate. But how do you feel about possibly, as a viewer, as a fan, maybe disagreeing with some of his motivations or so forth, or at least questioning the human side of Kirk, because we all have we all have blind spots, we all have flaws. And I think what these episodes, especially since they were aired in proximity to one another, so almost back to back, what does that make you rethink, if anything, your appraisal of Kirk? I mean, do you like him more because he's possibly got the wrong argument in certain scenes, or he's possibly, again, going down a path that lesser Starfleet captains would succumb to? I'm just curious if it puts any dent in the armor, even slight, of how we look at Kirk when we see him fallible, or at least, not always on the right side of the decisions, always got the answer at the snap of a finger. Tell me what you think of Kirk in these episodes, particularly, like I say, Obsession, where he, basically says, we're not leaving orbit, we're not going anywhere. I don't care if civilians are denied their medical health treatments. We're gonna smoke out this creature, wink, wink, and put it to bed. So, gentlemen, James Kirk, hero or flawed hero?
I think it humanizes him in a big way, and we see this in the films too. So it's a consistency thing with his character, is that, you know, as much as he's a hero, he's not like a comic book hero, you know, an unflawed, you know, paragon. He's human, you know, and that's why he needs Spock, why he needs McCoy, is that he needs that balance, because no one man can do it alone. He may be the captain, he may be in charge, but this is definitely a great message through his character of like, look, no matter how good you are at what you do, you are the sum of those around you. You are not on your own this crowning achievement. You know, there's still room to grow, there's still room to develop, still room to be flawed, and that's okay, because more often than not, Kirk's flaws end up somehow proving correct. You know, like stealing the Enterprise, shall we say, to go rescue Spock. Like, these things tend to pay off for Kirk, but, you know, certainly there's a Captain Ahab here. I didn't even doubt it for a second. The second this episode opened, I'm like, oh, this is a white whale story. Excuse me. The best part about Kirk, I think, in these episodes where he does show his flaws is it's very novel for the era. You know, the good guys who always wear the white hats never had flaws. You know, they never were portrayed as, you know, normal, average, or everyday. You know, Kirk, you know, I mean, he's definitely exceptional. There's no arguing that, but he has to be brought down to reality and given some flaws, given some missteps occasionally to make him a character worth following. And that's where Star Trek sets itself apart. That's why I think it's a timeless show, is because it's not afraid to show you the fact that even your heroes can have flaws. You know, and even the best among us, Spock, for example, can run into issues because of their beliefs or what they do. To Spock's end, I mean, it's far fewer, I think, than Kirk, but Spock is only half human, he's half Vulcan, you know, but we see with Vulcans, of course, in later episodes, like, they have issues too. And that's kind of the beauty of this utopian view of the future, is like, there is still strife, there is still challenges to overcome. It's how you avoid the pleasure machine, right? You have to have some kind of flaw, some kind of balance to understand the good from the bad, and to have value in the good things that come from all the hard work and all the endeavors that you make. So I think it's great. I like to see Kirk in these moments. It also shows how deeply he cares, you know, about his mistakes and about trying to right the wrongs and trying to live up to the fact that he should be better. He's trying to improve himself. Now, sometimes it does, unfortunately, result in obsession. You're trying so hard to correct a mistake, you end up making more, or you end up doing things that lead you down a path that just isn't what you anticipated or isn't what you intended. So for me, one of the reasons why this and those other episodes are successful is they really give you a modern human image that, you know, frankly, I don't think any other television series has done quite as well. At least to date, I mean, considering this is the late 60s, but certainly even since, I think very few shows capture this as poignantly as Star Trek, in terms of television. You know, you get sort of it played up to an umpteenth degree in other dramatic series, like, you know, I think of Law and Order, because I have to keep referencing the longest running television series, because it grates me, because it's the same story told in a million different ways and the same exact outcomes every time, but it's compelling. You know, it's compelling television to see a human person doing human things. Believe it or not, like, reality TV is not reality. This is the kind of TV that portrays reality. You're getting pictures of, you know, I mean, granted, it's fictionalized and it's played up to a certain degree to kind of emphasize these things, but that's what makes it interesting and unique. Not the fake, you know, I hate you because you betrayed me in a certain athletic challenge event. Come on, like that's not real. You know, real flaws are entertaining. You know, fake flaws, they're entertaining, I think, to the people who enjoy that. And if that's your thing, that's your thing. But if you want something that challenges you on a deeper level, makes you think about humanity, Star Trek, this episode, this is where you should go.
Look, it's funny you say challenging because that's, or challenge, because I actually wrote that down, that challenging equals respect. And what I mean by that is, you know, I think Kirk screams of leadership, and a good leader, and we've had these conversations multiple times, that a good leader will accept being questioned or challenged because you know, what you're always thinking isn't always right. And sometimes you have to be open to those around you. And I think a sign of respect from the people that are around you, that follow you, is that they will challenge you at the appropriate time. And that's something that we see throughout this episode. They're challenging him, and as you're saying, they had a right to do so because he was putting other lives at stake for what looked like a vendetta, right? And so that's the one thing I absolutely loved about this, is that, you know, I think sometimes when we see this Kirk, at least on the series, militaristic is the wrong word. His leadership can sometimes seem a little overbearing, but he's confident in his decisions, but the people around him are confident enough to step to him, as the youngins would say, and challenge him at those times. You know, kind of counter to that, well, the other thing I wrote down too is at the very end, he tells that ensign, was he an ensign?
Yeah.
To come talk to him.
Ensign Garavik.
He tells, yeah. So he tells the ensign at the end, "Hey, you know, come talk to me. I want to talk about your dad." That seemed very. So he goes from this, you know, very tough leader to this understanding captain, that I'm there, whether it's the top of the ranks or the beginning of the ranks. I'm there for those people. To me, it screamed to Pike, because to me that's something Pike would do. And we see that in Enterprise, and that's what's making me love Strange New Worlds just that much more. Like, I can't wait to see Pike again. And we've had this discussion. He is quickly moving up my rank of captains, and we might have to do a special episode one day just on captains, because I'm sure you guys will throw the Cisco around a little bit, which I still haven't seen enough of. And I wonder where you guys think Janeway, you know, lands in all this, and even Kelsey Grammer in an episode there where he was he captain of the Farragut in that one? No, the Bozeman. The Bozeman.
Yep.
So I think there have been and I think there might have even been some comic books with that captain in it, taking on the
boat. There was a line of comics surrounding Kelsey Grammer as
yeah,
captain of
that
the
character. Anyway, how we went from leadership to Kelsey Grammer, I don't know. But
do we all just watch the Marvels or something? Like,
well, and that's the only thing you get here on Pending Rebrand and the Warp Core is Kelsey Grammer references. So, how did that guy become...
Kelsey Grammer?
How did he become Beast, by the way, in X-Men? That's a whole nother podcast we could probably have, because I don't get it. I didn't see it at the time. Anyway.
I saw it in theater.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Excellent episode. Go ahead. I didn't know if you had somewhere else you wanted to go with that for Derby, because I had a few other things, but
oh no,
keep steering this ship.
I've got some wrap up notes, but what did you jot down, Lord Uther?
Kirk had a cold the entire episode.
Okay.
I'm like, he's got a sinus infection or something. Get this man a syringe and just pump him full of something, because the entire episode he sounded very nasally. I noticed. We also got a couple of his dramatic pauses, and I even wrote down the one where he said, oh, where was it? He had one of them in there. I thought I had oh no, that was in the next episode where he said or something. It was great, but he had one in this episode too. We get McCoy's fear of transporters.
Yes.
Like we're seeing that again, which I love that. Speaking of transporters, I also wrote down, there's always transporter drama. Can we ever just get a clean transport where we get all the molecules from one end to the other, instead of boosting power here and taking power from there and overriding that signal, and Spock's got to manipulate those little dials or whatever, those sliders. You think he was putting audio together for a soundboard. I mean, you never know. So just doing all that kind of stuff too. So it was great to see some of those things in this episode.
This is a lot of the tropes we fall in love with, right? The transporter issues, McCoy not wanting to use the transporter, the dramatic pauses from Kirk, the ominous alien entity, which is not of the typical physical form. This time it doesn't end up being like a weird parakeet thing.
Scotty, for one of the first times, saying, "We'll tear the ship apart, Captain. We'll blow up if we keep going." Like that was that was one of the
Yes,
early adoptions of that for this one here. I still don't know where Sulu is. He just he always manages to rotate off when the tribbles hit the fan.
I wrote that down. I was saying, do Sulu and Chekhov share the same salary because they can't be on at the same time, and maybe they just split that salary in half. I have no idea, but yeah, I saw that too, which goes to show you again the times that they are on camera together. We see like they were quick to kind of figure out that kind of back and forth between the two.
I think my favorite line, and there were some good lines in here. Spock saying, "Fortunately, I read faster," was a good little throwaway. But I believe it was Nurse Chapel who's back, who approaches Ensign Garavik, played by Stephen Brooks, when he's pouting in his quarters after being relieved of all duties by the captain. She brings him some food, and he doesn't want to eat any. And she replies, "Well, self-pity is a terrible first course. Why don't you try the soup instead?" And I thought that was a terrific line given to a character who is, usually given short shrift. Even when we do see her in sick bay with McCoy, he's usually, taking charge and so forth. "Nurse, hand me that laser scalpel." But that was a nice moment. It's always nice to see Majel Barrett get some screen time. And we, of course, know how they've developed the Chapel character in Strange New Worlds, so it kind of informs.
I really love the fake prescription. This is your prescription here from the doctor. It says to eat. And I suppose they could take you to sickbay and feed you intravenously.
Right.
And he's like, "Oh, okay." And then the doctor's like, "What? This is just some textbook." And she's like, "Psychology."
Yeah.
I'm like, that's fantastic. That's forward writing for the era. Talk about a strong female character, and I don't think Majel Barrett would have had it any other way. Happy birthday to her this week, by the way.
Oh, happy birthday!
May she rest in peace. The mother of Star Trek, or perhaps the matron of Star Trek, however you want to view it. Aside from our beloved Lucille Ball. But let's talk about Chapel for a second. In these episodes we've seen her in thus far, she seems to play a very pivotal role for a very kind of minor character. As a writer, we all know about these little vehicle characters that sort of drive things along when you just sort of need a warm body there, and you can't use a main character. It feels to me like she's more than that, though. I'm not accusing Roddenberry of injecting a special place for, Majel Barrett, but how does that feel to you as how they use her in this episode?
So, I mean, as an actress, as a performer, there is that sort of natural presence that she radiated. I mean, we can all remember way back. Wasn't she number one in The Cage? Before they sort of rethought that bridge hierarchy and kind of so forth. So I think the strength that she showed in the originally unaired pilot, I think they kind of knew, Roddenberry and the team, Gene especially, he knew what he had to work with there. And I mean, we had Uhura, obviously, who was a trailblazing role model, and constantly in the action, when 85% is taking place on the bridge, and even if she was just opening a communications relay to the nearest star base, she was inspiring. And I think that's that's how they kind of came around to view Chapel. At one point, maybe Yeoman Rand in the first season, they might have thought of doing it as sort of a yeoman character, easy on the eyes, gets to flirt with Kirk as she hands him a data pad. But I think with Chapel, I would have liked to see in this version of the series. I know, again, further off we get into Strange New Worlds, we do get these, more of her being a central plot linchpin. I would have liked to see her and McCoy have more scenes like the one that you just mentioned, being able to relate to each other as, doctor and nurse and boss and subordinate or equal, peer. If they'd had enough narrative room to allow for that, I think that would have been a really good thing. Like you say, it's the era, and most people were tuning in to see Chekhov's haircuts and Scotty's Aberdeen Scottish burr. So again, she made the most of what they gave her, and like I say, I think she was a talented enough performer and understood where her strengths were as a performer, that every time she was on camera, like, you totally bought it. You didn't say, oh, this isn't just another pretty face, put the uniform on, would you like some more coffee, doctor? Like, she wasn't going to deliver those lines, and she didn't. And yes, I think, and I especially, like I say, I look at her as sort of bifurcated. I look at the Chapel that they gave us in 1967, and then I look at how they've leveled up the character for Strange New Worlds. And to me, they're not inconsistent in any way, shape, or form. I do feel like I'm looking at the same character refracted through a slightly different prism, but I am feeling like they're very tonally consistent with the voice of the character, and I don't mean the actual voice, but what she would say, how she would behave in any given situation, while adding some nuance, some shadings, even a little comedy in the Chapel 2.0, with her dalliances with Spock and her nightclub breaking up scene that she did in the equivalent of 10 Forward. So yes, anytime I can get Chapel, and I don't know if they've settled on her as the computer voice yet. The computer voice, it may be her, but they have it making sound like, incorrect, does not compute. Like, we don't have those smooth tones of the Starfleet computers that featured her, so forth. Shield's at 40%. So we may have to wait a little bit for that there, but she's terrific. And this episode, which I think we'll allude to in our Warp Core presentation shortly, this is, we talk about, maybe it's not a foundational episode, maybe it doesn't lay out those bricks, right there at the bottom of the wall, but it is a worthy brick by all accounts. And there's, even if you think that the smoke is a little, oh, come on, it never detracts from, it never takes away from where the focus should be, which is character, drama, humor, suspense. All of those are mixed together. It's a very tasty recipe for obsession.
Absolutely. And with that, Lord Uther, what would you rate this episode out of 7 warp cores?
I'm going to go 6 out of 7. My only thing is, and I agree they did a good job with the smoke type creature, and maybe it was a budget constraint, but I like my bad guys a little more tangible, I guess. And we've kind of seen that before too. But again, overall, I love the dynamic of the crew. I love the storyline. So that was my only thing, was just maybe a little bit different than just than a smoke machine being the monster. So, Fert Derby, what are your thoughts?
Gentlemen, millennia ago when they invented the Arabic numeral system that we have used worldwide, this episode is why they invented the number 6. Like, this is the reason we have that's becoming between 5 and 7. So it can't scale the paramount mountain of its highest peak, and it was never intended to. But boy, when you consider some of the slight wobbles that season 2 has given us before apples and Adonises and so forth. This one, like it jumps over every hurdle, clears every obstacle, never knocks down any of those hurdles on the way to the finish line. So a terrific job by all accounts for this mission. And if you had this kind of tone throughout, and less wobbles, then season 2 would be right there, shoulder to shoulder with some of the heights of season 1 that we have talked about on the Warp Core. Go back and look at some of our season 1 analysis friends. There were some truly terrific television going on in 66 and 67, and we've chronicled it for you right here. So make sure you're subscribing, watching, and following along with us here. What do you say,
Absolutely.
Urza Master?
I'm going to round out with another 6 to give us a 666 run. This is, like you said, it's not a foundational episode per se, but if somebody wanted to understand Star Trek 3 better, this would be the episode I would point to. I think this gives you the depth of Kirk that I think even to date we haven't seen quite yet. We haven't really seen him humbled and humanized quite in such an emotional manner, which I think is huge for the series. This is certainly probably on the list of episodes I'd say, hey, if you want to really get to know Star Trek without watching the entire original series, which is not a huge task in and of itself necessarily either, but if you wanted to skip around and be like, I just want to watch the ones that really tell me why, the original series crew does the things they do in the movies, here you go. This is a big one. So for me, it does fall short of a perfect episode. I will say the smoke machine monsters always leave me with a little bit to be desired, but it's better than the carpet thing that crawled around and had to have like cement spackled onto it to make it better. That being said, that wasn't terrible either. I mean, again, you got to consider the budget, the era. It was better than Christmas Lights, but I think with a little more technology, the modern touch that maybe the next generation got, they might have been able to do a little bit more. But, again, I got to give them kudos for the time, too. I mean, the rest of the episode, I think, went off virtually without a hitch. I do think there was a little bit of a flaw in terms of how hesitant the crew was. They kind of recognized the white whale situation somewhat early, but it almost felt a little too early at times. Like, I feel like they should give Kirk a little bit more benefit of the doubt early on in the episode. And this is where I feel like if you give a script to a crew and a cast and they read ahead, it could be a problem. Because then they're kind of pre-acting the rest of the episode. But that being said, I don't think it took enough away to really knock this one down. I mean, this was still a very well executed episode. I think our guest stars did a great job, but I really think Chapel is like one of those hidden gems here, which I'm very glad, we were able to talk through that one, and I'm glad that that's probably one of the performances that informed Strange New Worlds. So with that, we will continue our journey into strange new Star Trek episodes next time on the Warp Core podcast. And gentlemen, as always, I'll leave you with a very special CBS All Access sticker. Live long and prosper.